Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar for the 2017-2018 academic year. And tonight we have with us Santi Karasame, who, did I say it right, Santi?
Karasami.
Karasami,
No.
who is, I know from way back when he was a student of mine at NYU, and now he's the founder and head of Project Recess, which works with K-12 teachers on using technology in the classroom. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Santi and go for it.
Okay, thank you for having me. Good evening, everyone. My name is Santi Karasami, and I'm the founder of this edtech consulting company called Project Recess. So I've had that company for about 4 years now. And I guess to take a step back into how I got into this role as an edtech consultant, I'll give you the brief bio of myself. So I was born and raised in Chicago. Go Bears. Unfortunately, they're not that good of a team. So my undergrad was actually in film and video. So I have a digital media background, and my first job out of undergrad was teaching film and video and animation to high school students. And so that was my first introduction to being an educator, and I fell in love with it. So I remember one of my students asking me to write him a letter of recommendation to get into college, and he got in. And I was like, wow, this is an opportunity to sort of change some lives. So I decided to stick with education, and I moved to New York to attend at the time, the Educational Communication and Technology program at NYU, now known as the Digital Media Design for Learning. And there, so I learned the fundamentals of design and instructional design and educational technology and how tech can influence education. And then after I graduated, I started working for this ed tech company for a couple of years. And then I said to myself that I was interested in starting my own company. And so there's the sort of birth of Project Recess. And I work with mainly the New York City Department of Education, public schools. So I partner with about 15 schools in various boroughs. And essentially I talk to administrators, find out what their views are for technology. I help them develop a technology vision. And then I sort of mentor the teachers in making that vision come to life. So I focus on a bunch of different ed tech tools, but specifically Google's G Suite for Education, Google Classroom and Google Drive. So I partner with the DOE as well as Google. So they'll contract me to run workshops for all of the Department of Ed. So it's been a pretty exciting experience just seeing how Google has transformed education over the years. That's Project Recess in a nutshell. Yeah, I don't know if there's any specific questions or.
I have a lot of questions about Google Classroom. It comes up all the time.
Okay.
Because a lot of them are teachers.
Yeah.
And many of them tell us that they're in school systems where Google Classroom is really being pushed very hard, and but people don't necessarily know how to use it. So what kinds of things are you seeing in your work with Google Classroom and teachers?
Yeah, so Google Classroom has become quite popular, I mean, globally, specifically within the DOE. And I mean, when I show teachers Google Classroom, they all get excited about it because, like, even when I was in school, we used Blackboard, and I think most people are familiar with that platform, and most of the people I work with sort of have criticisms for how Blackboard works, but then when I show them how Google Classroom functions, they sort of get it. So I think Google has done a great job with their interface. So the teachers have sort of have welcomed Classroom as well as Google's G Suite for Education as a whole, because most people have a Gmail account, right? So then most people are already familiar with how that email platform works, how Google Docs works, and so the learning curve is generally speaking low since most people are using it already. And these are the tools that people use in businesses. So I work mainly with middle schools. So if we're teaching our middle school students how to use these tools, how to become familiar with them, then they're that much more ready when they sort of get to high school, get to college, get to the job market. So they've been receptive about using Google Classroom.
And do you see them using it, or what's the right way to phrase this? Do you see them using it well, using it creatively, or is that the kind of thing that you have to guide them more with? And what's the impulse of most teachers when they have this thrown at them, and does that work for you as sort of a good use of Google Classroom, or do you feel sort of that you're trying to show them a way to do things that they might not be naturally thinking of?
Yeah, so yeah, most teachers are not familiar with, I guess, many of the collaborative features of Classroom. So that's one of my main roles. So I'll work with either individual teachers or teacher teams or grade teams, and so we'll get to the heart of like what they're trying to teach, right? So first, I'm sort of breaking it down by subject. Are you a humanities teacher? Are you a math teacher? If that's the case, and what does your curriculum look like? And then we'll sort of work on specific ways we can introduce collaboration to happen using Google Classroom and like other Google tools as well, Google Docs, things like that. So, for example, if I'm working with a social studies teacher and one of the original assignments was to create an essay, maybe we can transform that and have students, build an interactive Google slide presentation, even a website, right? So how can we not just replace sheet of paper with a laptop, but how can we introduce all these other modes of collaboration? So yeah, that is my main role, to help teachers like truly use these tools for collaboration.
Santi, who typically brings you in? How do you end up in somebody's classroom? Who's asking for you? Is it teachers? Is it the school system? Is it the administrators?
So it's a little bit of both. For me to start working with a school, it would have to be the administrator, right? So like I'll run various workshops, and if principals are there, they'll see the work that I do, and we'll work out a schedule where I can go to their school. I will have teachers who are interested in working with me or having me come to the school, but ultimately because of who's in charge of the budget, it has to be an administrator. So if a teacher is interested, like that, they will approach the administrator and say, hey, this company is doing some interesting work, maybe they can support us, and we'll go from there. There is a question that somebody posed. Somebody said that in their district they use Google but don't use Classroom because of the fact that parents cannot log in and link themselves to their child's account. So they chose this platform called Canvas. And then this person is asking, does that sound right? I don't want this to be like a pitch to use Google Classroom, but with that specific question, so if the question is parents don't use it because I can't log in, there is a feature where you can link a parent's email account to a student in Classroom. So let's say I'm a teacher, everybody here is a student. If I get your parents' email address and I put it in there, if I administer an assignment, parents will get an email of that assignment. So parents can't log in, but they are still in the loop of what academic information or happenings is going on. I'm not too familiar with Canvas, but in terms of the parent aspect, yeah, so you can link a parent account there.
Yeah, I definitely, if other people have questions, I definitely should hop in, because I don't mean to dominate at all. Just, very
I
often.
Sorry. I thought I was unmuted and I started talking, and then I realized I'm not. I have a question, more like a process question. So if you're brought in by the administration and you're working with all different teachers, do you ever encounter teachers who aren't interested in incorporating these tools? And do you have strategies of how you work with people who are more tech resistant to get them to see the benefits of something like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I come across teachers like that all the time. So it's a mix, right? Like teachers, people are very different in where they are technologically speaking, and maybe adopting new ways of processes and methods in their classroom. So yeah, I'll have a teacher who's ready to hit the ground running, but then I'll come across people who are quite resistant and are set in their ways of chalk and talk or what have you. So in those situations, I'm going to target the teachers who are willing to use the tools, and then I'm going to sort of have them talk to the teachers who are resistant. So when the teachers who are resistant see their colleagues and how these tools are working for them, and they're teaching the same students, and buy-ins are going to be a little bit easier, because yes, it's hard for me to come into a school and build a rapport with somebody who already doesn't want to use it, right? And so different things can happen. The principal can just, force that person just to use a tool. And like, that's not necessarily the best way, but from my experience, yeah, I'll focus on the teachers who are interested and who are willing. And then you'll create this culture of teachers seeing it work. And they're like, okay, I'm going to give that a try. So one of the school that I was at today is a school in Jamaica, Queens. And there's about, it's a big school. There's 1,600 students. And when I first started working there 4 years ago, I worked with maybe 4 6th grade teachers in middle school. And then it is a process. And that's something that a lot of people don't necessarily understand. If you're going to adopt, not just Google, but if you're going to adopt technology and really incorporate it into your curriculum, it's going to take a while. And we're talking years if you really want this to be infused in your culture. So I think that's something big that administrators need to understand and sort of modify their expectations. And so with that school, yeah, I work with about 4 or 5 6th grade teachers. They started working with it, and then those teachers that were hesitant, the students of those teachers are saying, "Hey, can we use technology? Can we use Classroom?" And when that motivation is coming from your students, I think that makes it difficult for the teacher to continue to resist. So I just work with the teachers who are willing to do it, and that creates a positive chain reaction.
Yeah, I could imagine when the students start seeing it in other classes that they start asking for it, and that must be a big motivator for people to adopt.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, students will complain, like, "Oh, why are we still writing? Why are we using so much paper? Why do we have all these copies? When Miss So and So has everything on the laptop."
So you mentioned a couple times now too that you work a lot with middle school. Why do you think middle school is your biggest target population? Is that by your choice, or by their middle school teachers are asking you for your services more often than either elementary or high school?
I think I just my first client was a middle school, and then how I've been getting more schools is word of mouth. That's in my experience, that's the best way to do it. I've sent cold emails out. I've gone to conferences, but there's something to be said about a warm introduction, right? So if a principal that I'm working with is talking to other middle school principals, then it's easier for me to start working with them. So I think that's part of the reason why, but also I think it's in my opinion, it's the right age to start working with these students, with these tools. Like 6th grade is really good. Like they're already sort of have the capacity to understand how these tools work. I would even say like 5th grade. So I do work with some elementary schools also. So I just think it's a good age to start. Looking at some other questions. What path led me to this position? Oh, is that me?
No, it's me.
Okay. So I'm sorry. I'm just reading some of the questions here. Okay. What path led me to this position? Okay, somebody became a Google trainer. Yes, I think that's a great way. Like if you're interested in doing similar work, yes, I think being a trainer is will help. So I'm a trainer, and once you taking a step back, there are different levels of, I guess, distinction in terms of being a Google for Education teacher. So you can become level 1 and level 2 certified. That means you know how to use the tools well, and then when you become a trainer, you are sort of part of this group of other trainers, and they list you on the trainer website. So that's a good way to start getting your name out there and getting business. I've definitely have received some requests for professional development through the Google Trainer site. So I think that's a great start. But I think my favorite aspect of being a trainer is you are part of this community of other people who are doing similar work. So I get a daily digest of questions from trainers all across the globe, and it's interesting to see what issues people have, how people are solving them in different countries, different grade levels, different learning environments. So that's my favorite part about being a trainer, just being part of this community. And then if you want to, you could apply to be a Google Innovator, where you pitch a project idea to Google, and if they are into it, they invite you to a Google Academy at a Google headquarters, and you work on this project. So it's a nice community. So yeah, if you're interested in doing something like this, yes, trainers is a good start.
Did you consider whether to get a job at a school doing this before you decided to go independent and advise schools? Had you?
Yeah, I mean, I thought about working with a school, but so before I started my own company, I was also working with a different company doing similar work, and for myself, I really enjoyed going from school to school because I feel like I would learn as much from them as they would from me, because you can have two schools that are in the same district, but they could be completely different, right? It really depends on the administration. It depends on their focus on the curriculum, and I feel like that makes me a better person to provide sort of this advice and consultation to other schools. So I really enjoy being in different environments. Somebody else had a question. Somebody's curious, because I'm an outside consulting firm, don't school districts have their own technical group that provide similar services? So the DOE is huge, right? It's the largest school system in the nation. And I think they do have an arm that focuses on sort of consulting, but I've not really seen them, I've not really seen them that active around. So technically, yes, they do have a group like that, but man, there are thousands of schools in the DOE, and a lot of them just want to go a different route, And I think I've built a really good rapport with a lot of the schools that I work with, and I at the end of the day, in my work, it's a lot of the focus is on relationships, and I have a good relationship with these schools, and they have lines in their budget for consultants, so they have to use it, and I think I hope they enjoy working with me. I think they do. Okay, follow-up question to that. How often do I bring in other tools other than Google? Do I think there's a market for other tools within the schools? So that's a good question. How often do I bring in tools other than Google? So a lot of schools will use platforms that focus on a specific thing. For example, grading, right? So Google doesn't really have a grade book. So I'll train teachers on how to use some grading platforms. There are some video platforms that are pretty, they're pretty popular, and Google doesn't necessarily sort of match what they do. Like something that I'm thinking of the top of my head is this program called Flipgrid, where you can upload like short video clips. But I mean, to be honest, I don't really introduce that many other tools into the classroom, because one of the challenges I come across, teachers are so busy, right? Like they're grading papers, working on bulletin boards, calling parents, doing a lot of things. And from my experience, they don't want to remember another login, and, I guess the answer to that is, you can do a single sign-in using Google. But from my experience, a lot of teachers just want to focus on one platform and really get into it. And I think Google is flexible enough that it allows that platform to be used in multiple grades and multiple subjects. Yeah. Any other?
I wonder how often in the past I've worked with some New York City schools doing some research in the schools involving computer use, and constantly we were up against hardware problems, like the school bandwidth couldn't support all the students in the class using the internet at once, or the school had a rack of 30 laptops, only 20 of them had power cords, or people walked off with computers. How much of that kind of stuff do you find yourself dealing with?
I used to see that all the time, Ruth, and it made my job so difficult, right? So yeah, if you're not familiar with many public schools and how their tech setup is, like you go in there and the machines just don't work. A lot of them don't work. And like, to be honest, I don't blame the teachers for not using technology in that case, because their laptop cards are not set up properly. They're not charged. It takes them forever to get, to boot up. I get it. I mean, if I were in that position, I would not want to use technology either. I try to find a different way. But now it's different with the introduction of the Chromebook, right? So when the Chromebook first came out, I don't know how many years ago, like I was skeptical about it. Like I was like, a laptop that just saves everything online. Why would I use that? But the Chromebooks come a long way. And I think like last year, like more than 50% of laptops in schools across the US are Chromebooks now. And that happened almost overnight. It's amazing how the Chromebook has proliferated, right? So a lot of the work I do also is recommending Chromebooks and showing school technology administrators how to deploy those in a school. And I think the Chromebook has solved a lot of those hardware issues. And I'll compare the Chromebook to another popular tool, the iPad. So there are a lot of iPads in the schools that I work with. And like me personally, I prefer the Chromebook because I think the way that the iPad is designed, it's for one person really. Like you sign in with your Apple ID, it revolves around this one user experience. But in many schools, you can't really do that. You're sharing devices, and it's very difficult to, let's say you get a shipment of 200 iPads. It's difficult to set those up. I've worked with groups of DOE technology people, and I wish it were easier, but it's more difficult than it should be to deploy iPads in a school. Whereas with a Chromebook, it's simple. You can set down the restrictions. You can lock it so only somebody can log in with a school domain. You have a lot of flexibility with the Chromebook. So I think that has alleviated a lot of the hardware issues that I've come across. And thankfully, the DOE is upgrading their bandwidth in a lot of schools because years ago, it was tough. It was really tough. Oh, okay. Kristen loves Flipgrid, and she thinks I should push it more. I'll do it. She also wonders, do I ever work with teachers who use Google Hangouts? And if yes, have I seen any cool examples of Hangouts? Yeah, definitely. Virtual field trips, I think are pretty cool. So I was working with a middle school in East Harlem with a geography teacher, and we were discussing landscapes, and they were discussing landscapes difference in landscapes between East Harlem and Iceland. Small differences, right? So like working with them, we found a school in Reykjavik, and then we had a Google Hangout where this school in East Harlem had a conversation with the school in Reykjavik, and I thought that was a lot of fun. So yeah, I think Hangouts is great. I mean, the internet has changed everything, right? Hangouts or just like video conferencing, Zoom right here. So I've seen a lot of teachers sort of go on these virtual field trips, and it's easier to bring an expert into the school because it's easier for an expert to sit at their house and open their computer and have a conversation. Book clubs also, somebody said Hangouts are great for book clubs. Hey, I've never done that, but that sounds like a good idea too. Okay, yeah. And next question.
Somebody else have a question before I jump in? There was actually, this isn't exactly a question, but I think maybe last year in the Wall Street Journal, there was actually a little thing about how you can use a jump drive to take any old computer, which has very little power, and wipe it out and make it into a Chromebook. Did you see that?
Yes, I believe the company is Neverwhere.
Yes, I think it was. And we tried it here at home. We had an old
cool.
Dell that was like effectively dead. It could not do anything, and it actually works. You just install it. Gives you just the sort of the framework, and then it's good enough because all you need is an internet connection. It doesn't have to be all that fast for it to work. So just they Neverwhere has a partnership with the Department of Ed. And if you qualify, if you're on their list, and like this list is extensive, it includes, a couple thousand schools, they'll give you, I think, like 75 free licenses or something. So yeah, that's, if I come across a school that has like an aging computer lab, I will suggest that. I've never tried it at a school because schools will typically refresh their hardware, but I think it's a creative solution for breathing life into an old computer. Yeah, it's amazing. I think it's really refreshing to hear somebody say that the iPads are not all that. All we hear is how wonderful they are.
and I'm really modifying my language on that. It's just it's just so it's definitely harder than it needs to be. So whenever I have conversations with principals and they're discussing what hardware to purchase, I'm always easing them into Chromebooks, if not just a traditional laptop, right? And if we're trying to sort of show our kids how to type as well. I mean, typing's easier on a laptop, right? It's kind of tricky to do that on an iPad. I mean, when you're working with the younger grades, though, yes, I see the appeal of an iPad when you're working with kindergarten or first grade. But touchscreen laptop can do a lot as well.
Yeah. Is there anything you're seeing way too much of because of Google Classroom? Like things that teachers are getting repetitive, or they're getting, they're just kind of relying on the same old tricks, or in other words, not everything that you can do, the Chromebook is going to be innovative and brilliant and wonderful. Is there anything that's just kind of tired and enough?
I don't know.
Not yet. Not yet.
Not necessarily. I mean, I was going to say like the use of like something like Google Docs, but I mean that would be focusing too much on the actual tech, right? And like that's something I try to be mindful of. Like at the end of the day, they're tools, right? Maybe in 5 years, Google's not going to be that effective anymore. It's going to be another tool that does a better job of sort of like displaying what a student knows and like what content they can create. I mean, Google Docs it's popular, but what I love about seeing it is like,
I'm not sure how to help with that yet.
Sorry, my Google Home is talking to me. It heard me say that. It I don't know. It provides opportunities for collaboration, right? And yeah, I've not seen anything that old yet. A question from Kristen. Do I think we'll need to continue teaching kids to type? Yes, I do. I mean, yeah, I use voice to text, but people are always going to need to learn how to type, right? And type quickly. And so I think a big misconception is students are tech savvy. Young people are tech savvy, but what exactly does that mean, right? Every school I work with, and none of them they don't teach typing. So all the students I work with don't know how to type well. They're hunting and pecking. And I kind of wish they would bring back typing. In high school, I had a typing class, and I think they should bring it back. But I think we should continue teaching students how to do that, because when you have to type a 1,000-word essay, you're going to need to learn how to type well.
Yeah, I agree. I have my kids are in 5th grade, and they really have cut down on the amount of typing practice that they give them. And at the middle school, they don't do any of it. So it's really shocking to me, because I feel like that's one of the skills that has really helped me to succeed, especially now that everything is digital and everything requires emailing. But part of me wonders if I should bother pushing them, because are they just going to be dictating their papers and, Siri's going to be typing them for them? It's hard to know what's going to happen 10 years from now when they're in college.
I went to one of the last single-sex high schools in New York City. So I was in high school in the 70s, and it was a girls' school. And their big move towards liberation was to not teach us typing, because they were not going to have their graduates go out and be secretaries. So they wanted something better for us, so we never learned to type. And it actually has been a handicap. I still don't type very quickly or well.
We'll get you a copy of Mavis Beacon.
I've tried 10 thumbs. I've been through a lot of those.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So here's another question from Susan. If I'm training the teachers, who's training the students, or do they need training? I think that's a great question. So I actually do work with students also. So I focus primarily on working with teachers, but I'll also push into the classroom and sort of work with students on, getting set up with Classroom, or how do we use Google Slides in a particular project, or how do we build a website. So I do work with teachers, but a lot of that does fall on the teachers to do that. So, I need to be, good at my job and making sure the teachers know how to use these tools. And, I'll give them techniques on how they can sort of transfer those skills over to their class.
Santi, how do you end up communicating with the teachers? Do you maintain any kind of like a Google Classroom where teachers can ask you questions, or do you only talk to them when you come into the school, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I do have Google Classrooms in different schools that I work with, but mainly it's a lot of it is email. You know, so they'll shoot me a message here and there. Um, but actually, so I you know my email is going to be flooded with all these different schools. If I say, hey, if you have a problem, just go ahead and email me. So I actually sort of encourage teachers to join different professional learning communities online. So there's a Facebook community that's quite active. It's the NYC Schools Tech Group, and so it's mainly teachers in New York BOE, and there's like 2,000 people in this group, and this is the most active group I've ever seen in my life, and I think it's incredibly helpful. So somebody will post a question on anything tech related, Google or not, and chances are somebody's on there and somebody will respond. So I try to have people join that so they're comfortable asking questions, they're understanding how to phrase their question and how to respond to other people's questions also.
That's great to know, because I think that's something maybe one of our students could do, is set up a similar group for Connecticut teachers, or even sort of regionally, to help each other. That's a really cool idea. And I had actually kind of a question that's connected to that when you mentioned that. Do you have any websites or blogs or anything that you follow to sort of stay up to speed with what's happening and kind of emerging tech and that kind of thing? Because I know our students are always asking that, that kind of question.
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, just getting that daily digest from the Google trainers. Like if you're a part of that group, like I love cruising through that. Otherwise, there's this gentleman that has a really great blog, Eric Curtis, and his blog is called Control Alt Achieve. And I think he has really creative ways on how to use technology, specifically Google, within the classroom. So there's the director of digital engagement for the DOE, this woman, Lisa Nielsen, and she has a really great blog too called The Innovative Educator. And that's more of a pedagogical approach to technology, whereas Eric Curtis is more like straight, how do we use these tools to do X, Y, and Z? So I think those are really good places to start. And there are Google educator groups all over the globe. And so I'm pretty sure there's one in Connecticut. And that's a really great place for people to share ideas. Otherwise, it gets kind of overwhelming with all the different blogs out there. There's a lot, but those are the ones that I'll check. Yeah. I guess in terms of interesting projects that I've seen or different initiatives, so it's not always about, oh yeah, how can we do something radical, something innovative to completely change everything. Sometimes the best solutions are simple, right? So some of the projects that I'm working on now, so in the DOE, every student needs to fill out a literal blue card with your emergency contact information on it, right? So it's called a blue card, and you have your parent or guardian information, your phone number, emergency contact, information like that. And so, for example, one of the schools I work at, 1,600 students, that's 1,600 blue cards, and the handwriting is terrible for all of them. When you multiply that across, thousands of schools in the DOE, it can get kind of unruly. So, we're just trying to switch over to something digital. And a simple idea is using Google Forms. So we just took those same questions, put it on a Google form, and we're digitizing the blue cards. And if you use Google Forms, all of the information gets sent to a Google Sheet, which is just like Excel, and it's just easy to search, right? Control F, and you can find the student's name. That's a very simple solution. Not necessarily innovative, but it helps tremendously. And same thing with, so this same school, it's in Jamaica, Queens, and there's like maybe 10 or 15 different languages that are being spoken in the school. And we sent out a Google Form language survey, right, to the students to let us know what the parents' preferred language at home is. So a lot of these tools can really gather information and sort of show you what population you're working with rather quickly, right? So when I work with a school, I'm asking myself, how can this school, work like a startup? How can it work smarter, not harder? And you'd be surprised. A lot of these main offices at these schools are doing a lot of things the old-fashioned way. When I show them these collaborative tools, it helps. Okay, just looking at different questions. Okay. So Susan is, Susan's asking a question. So when I say I offer curriculum support on my website, what exactly do I mean by that? Am I actually helping create lessons or just pointing them in the direction of available tools? So it's both. So if typically I'm working with a school once a week, and so I'll meet with either a group of teachers or a teacher individually, and yes, I'll sit with them and I'll create a lesson with them. But then at the same time, I am sharing resources where they can be self-sufficient. So it's both of those. Let's see. Do I see any tension between the use of technology and the focus on testing? Do teachers think technology is wasting time? Yes, I do see that tension. So yeah, there's a lot of tests that are happening in schools, and that's part of the reason why a lot of teachers are so busy. It's just a lot of test prep, and so that does take away time from using other tech tools, be it Google or something else. So I do see that, and honestly, I don't know how to go about that. Like, testing needs to happen, right? I personally I don't think that much testing should happen, because it seems like it's happening every other month. There's like some big standardized test that students have to take, and that's just part of the job, So I'm being creative with my schedule with teachers and trying to see how they can fit it in. But that definitely is a sort of tension. Okay, using tools to bridge the homeschool gap. Parents who want to help their kids but don't know how. So a lot of schools that I work with also, teachers will create websites, class websites. And so I think that's a nice way to start. That's a nice way to sort of build one bridge between school and home. So Google redid their Google Sites platform. If anybody's used Google Sites before, it's tricky to use back then, but now it's much easier. So I will show teachers how to use Google Sites in conjunction with their Google Classroom, because the tools work seamlessly together, and it's a nice way. Like, if a student is sick and he or she's at home, then they can jump on the class website and find information there. Anything else? I will say one more thing about websites. I think another creative way that sites are being used are in the form of digital portfolios. So if we're talking about assessment and this idea of alternative assessment, so many schools are having a student create a Google site, so website, and then designating a page for a particular subject, and then this site follows the student throughout their career at the school, and then at the end you have this digital portfolio within their website. So I think that's happening at some schools. That's a work that I'm trying to encourage all my schools to work with, because otherwise it's this paper folder, that is going to get thrown out at the end of the year. There's another question. Do I work with any fully online classes or schools? No, all the schools I work with are traditional brick and mortar schools. I mean, me personally, I've never taken an online class because I don't think I have the discipline. I think there's something to be said about seeing a class in person, but at the same time, like, I've seen the power of online classes, just their reach and their scale. But I personally don't work with any fully online classes or schools.
Well, hopefully our students would tell you how great online classes could be.
I'm just a bad student.
Any other questions or thoughts?
Do I have intentions of expanding my skills to other organizations? I do work with some nonprofits because when a school signs up for a Google account, they have a free version of these tools, and the same thing goes for nonprofits, right? So I do work with a few, but primarily schools. Yeah, if that's what that question is referring to.
Do you work with any little schools with little kids? Any kindergartens? Any nursery schools? Any?
So I do work with some elementary schools, K-5, and the work I do there, that's mainly with the teachers, right? Like how do they, how can they lesson plan collaboratively? How can they, use something like Google Calendar to plan everything? So when the population is that young, I'm not necessarily doing a lot of tech work with the students there. It's more making sure that teachers are sort of creating effective workflows and collaborating with their other teachers.
Because I actually wonder whether parents of little kids are thinking that sending the kids to school is a good way to get them to stop using screens all the time and maybe push back against technology in school because kids are so inundated with it at home. I don't know. I'm just curious whether you.
Yeah, I've personally not seen or heard that. So yeah, most of the schools I work with who are working with the younger students, there's a lot of screen time because a lot of the schools will have interactive whiteboards, right? And so a lot of the lessons are happening on there or like on an iPad.
I push back on the school when they ask the kids to do homework on the computer. If it's typing a paper or something like that, but they have them doing a lot of these online games and that type of stuff at home. That, to me, I'm trying to cut down screen time at home. So when they come home and say, we're required to, go on the computer for 2 hours tonight and play a math game, that's the technology that I've been pushing back with my kids. But in terms of in the classroom, I'm happy to see them using it as long as they're doing it in an educational way.
Yeah, I guess like talking to my friends who have kids, like they definitely push back on screen time too. And I think if you look at the people who are like that immersed in tech, like the people who work for these tech companies, I think the way that they raise their children also, and like the articles that I've read, they put a big limit on screen time also. I don't have any kids, but if I did, I'll think, how would I treat technology? I don't even want to give them technology. Like a lot of it scares me, just because I've seen what it can do. Like if we're talking about challenges, yeah, bullying, like that's one of the challenges too. People hacking emails and sending stupid things. Like these are all realities. So when I work with schools, it's very easy for schools to get lost in the technical aspect of setting things up, right? Like, oh, we need to create the emails for everybody. We need to get the domain set up. But then a lot of times schools will forget to have conversations with students on why are we using this to begin with? What does it mean to be, a digital citizen? Something I do get from a lot of schools, people ask me, hey Santi, how do we filter this web page? How do we block this? And yeah, there are ways to do it, but do you really want to go down that hole? Right? Because then it's a game of whack-a-mole, right? You're not going to block every website, and so I'm trying to shift the conversation from filtering to, all right, how do we teach our young people to recognize something that they're not supposed to participate in, and sort of like get away from it to begin with. I think that's a better way to look at technology, because yeah, it's scary. Like there's a lot of things out there that are not for students, but how can we prepare them? So like a lot of these conversations I'm trying to initiate and have with the schools I work with. Yeah, digital citizenship, yes, as Kristen says, yeah, definitely one of the most important lessons.
Did you see there's a question before that from Sherry?
Oh, okay. Use about 3 different websites and want the parents to see what their children are using at home. Is it too much? I don't know. I think it all depends, right? Like depends on how much work the websites require, you know, but I think it all depends. I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe.
Any other thoughts, or what about Santi? Do you ever find yourself in the position that a teacher says, "Well, I'd like to use Google Classrooms to do this or that," and your opinion is like, "Don't use Google Classrooms to do that. Just like talk to the kids, or just like present that with your with your voice and your body and your actual physical presence. Like don't go there. You don't need to go to the web for that."
You know what? Yes, yes, I do, because yeah, like you know, I work in tech, but at the end of the day, like you want to have, you know, you want to have a good rapport with your students, and there's something to be said about, you know, that physical presence. So yes, there are times where, you know, I'll work with somebody and I'll be like, you know what, maybe you can just do it on paper. Maybe it just makes sense to do this on paper. Yeah, I don't want to use technology for technology's sake, right? Like I don't know if anybody should be doing that. And so I ask myself those questions too when a teacher is asking me how to go about carrying out a lesson. Yeah, I'm looking at different options, and one of those options is, do we even need tech? Should we just sit in a circle and have a conversation, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, you know. Balance, I guess, right?
I would agree. So, are there any other questions, or here we go?
You find most people using technology as an extended pencil.
Excellent.
Hey, yeah, yes. So there's this model that is going around that's quite popular, the SAMR model, and it stands for substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition, right? So essentially, look at how you're using tech, and is it just, you know, are you just replacing something, or are you just using it as an extended pencil, or are you using it for ways to really change how you're teaching, and are we affording different opportunities? I don't know if I see most people using technology as an extended pencil, but I see a lot of people using it as that. You know, man, it breaks my heart to see a class full of laptops, and yeah, they're just sort of typing on Microsoft Word and not really doing anything else with it. Or they just have an iPad and they're on YouTube, right? And just really watching it. So yeah, that's a big part of what I'm doing. Like, how do we really use these tools for collaboration? But yeah, I do see a lot of teachers doing that.
Right. We see that actually with our students coming into the master's program. When people first come in, they're natural when they have to come up with a project idea or something. They first come up with things that are basically a digital workbook, or in other words, it's just this substitution thing where you take your tracing letters, and instead of doing it on a workbook, you do it on the screen or something.
Right.
So, and it really takes a little prodding sometimes to push people out of that. What's sort of the most natural thing? You take what you know and you transpose it to a screen. So it takes a little pushing to get people to think outside that box.
Yeah, and so technology's been around and people use it, but I think this idea of really using technology to transform these opportunities, I think that is still new. And I think a lot of times teachers, they don't do that because a lot of them don't know how, or they really haven't seen technology, being used in these ways of, making a website, going on a virtual field trip, collaborating with students, in a different class, in a different country. Like, these are all, I think, fairly new concepts for a lot of teachers. So a lot of the work I do is sort of introduce them to examples and hopefully inspire them. So another question, so keeping that theme in mind, who oversees the use of technology in the classrooms? Who regulates it? The teacher. A lot of times I see it's up to the teacher, right? And going back to this idea that, in many schools, teachers wear a lot of hats, and for better or for worse. So yeah, I think it's them. Some schools don't even have a technology coordinator, unfortunately. So it's really up to the teachers. So I think, again, that comes back to like, how well can I support them to really use these tools to alleviate a lot of the work that they're doing if they're working, you know, smarter, not harder.
Any other last thoughts, last questions, or Santi, do you have any last thoughts you'd like to leave these budding instructional designers with?
I think this is an exciting field, you know. So when I first joined ECT or at NYU, I think this is a very new field, and I still think it is. I think it's changing quite rapidly. I think there are a ton of jobs that I've seen for instructional designers, so I think people are going to be in a good place when they graduate. Yeah, and I just see the field changing and offering more opportunities. So I'm very happy that the students are in this program and that you're helping facilitate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you again, and I think this was actually really very useful. Had a lot of good information and good things to think about. Any other closing questions or?
No, I want to say thank you too. It was really interesting because I don't have a lot of perspective into the K-12 environment, so it was great information. It was really useful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. This was great.
Thanks a lot. We'll talk.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, Santi. Bye-bye.
Bye now.